Hi, it's me, Ingrid P. And you missed the woodpecker picking the tree behind me, but it was quite nice to finally be able to sit in the sun in nature. It's quite amazing. I'm glad that to have this extra hour of sunlight after work. Also, it was actually 13 degrees today, which is really extraordinary. At least, it's the 1st of April. I thought that it was an April Fool's, but apparently it's going to be like this tomorrow as well. For Sweden, this is a lot. Anyway, I had an ethics course and a diversity and equality course, 2 days out in the middle of nowhere. It was nice to take the bus actually for an hour outside of town because I saw some cranes, those birds, birds, with their long necks and everything. I actually saw them up close from the road, and I think the woodpecker is picking again. Okay, I'm guessing that you guys can't hear it, but he goes boop, boop, boop. Anyway, yeah, so I'm doing my bird watching pretty much, and for you guys who have seen that video where I talk about my study group from the surgery semester, the guy who was the athlete was at this course as well, and it was just nice to sit next to him and talk. He's a really mellow guy, but there were some people who weren't as mellow. Let's just say, everybody was lovely except for this one guy. So yeah, we were talking about minority stress, where we all have a stress, because of work and family and all sorts of things. But then we have an extra layer of stress because as a minority, you are exposed to external stressors, which are, bullying, violence, that kind of thing, not being accepted, exclusion. And then there's the internal stressors, which is kind of your coping strategies for this situation, which is either that you get really hyper vigilant, and so you're always vigilant towards that somebody is going to hurt you. Another one is that you might hide, like spend a lot of energy and stress hiding your true self. Another thing might be that you might try to overcompensate. Like, for example, if you're the only black person at work, you might feel the need to work harder than the others in order, because you're kind of a representative of your ethnicity or your minority. So I found that that was quite true. I am part of a minority in that I am lesbian and asexual, so I'm part of the LGBTQIA plus community, and I'm also autistic, so that means that I'm also a disabled person. So she talked about intersectionality, which is kind of where there's the overlap between a certain minority groups. So I would be kind of in an overlap, as I have I'm both LGBT and I'm autistic and I'm a woman. However, I'm not black and I'm cis, so I do have some privileges in that life is not completely... Oh, there's a bumblebee behind me. So if you can hear some of the buzzing, that's because of the bumblebee. Okay. Sorry, I'm following the bumblebee. So it was good that we got to learn about these things. However, there was one, and here I am being a person who stereotypes people, but he was an orthopedic doctor, which I'm not surprised. You know, it is kind of a stereotype in itself. However, I wouldn't consider orthopedic doctors to be a minority group, so I don't feel bad about, you know, speaking a little bit about that. I want to be open-minded towards orthopedic doctors, but, you know, a lot of their work is not as much about having the fine human capacities of being gentle and kind, and much more about the technical skill, for which I admire Jan. No, I admire the technical skill. However, he was both homophobic and racist, so that was a thing, and he spoke, and it was like, the problem is that he was the person who spoke first, and then we had to like stop him from talking. And then there was also the fact that I kind of got riled up, but, you know, the fact is that he should have just kept quiet. Instead, he said this in front of the whole group. He said certain bad things about, basically trans people, non-binary people. He said that, like, it's like identifying as a basketball, which, you know, is ridiculous. Like, people don't identify as a basketball. That's not what the whole gender thing is about. Also, he said that certain people were more queer than others and they don't suffer, so they shouldn't be counted as a minority. He said a lot of shady stuff, and you know, I'm glad that it seemed like most people were on the side of the people who want to accept people, and people who want to be inclusive, and who are progressive and accepting of other people. And the course leader tried to stop him, and there was another person in our group that who is also a straight white guy, so it kind of helped that he stood up for, you know, minorities by just talking out loud, and I'm glad for that. But yeah, so it was kind of a weird situation. I'm glad that we had this course. It was really good. It was good to talk about the ethical dilemmas with our different cases. My case was about somebody who needed high doses of medicine that are actually an overdose of medication, but that was prescribed by another doctor, and then I had to take over, and I had to say no to the patient, and that was my ethical dilemma. So all in all, very good course, kind of boring in terms of the ethics, the philosophy, a lot of things that I did not understand that went way over my head. I'm also glad for the discussion about minority stress, which I felt that I knew about this concept before, but that's only because I've learned about autism and all of that. And as a LGBTQ person, I've also learned about that. But I think that it's good for people who aren't in minorities to learn about this, but also people who are in minorities who haven't learned about this before. There was a discussion about why do we call it microaggressions, because the person, often it's not their intent to aggress the person by saying something. Sometimes it's very, seems innocuous things, like saying, oh, where do you come from? What they mean is actually they're curious about the other person and they want to strike a connection. But maybe that person has heard that question being said 10,000 times. Or like, oh, you speak such good Swedish, when, this person has lived in the country for 10 years. And it's actually kind of an insult. And it's not the person's intent. Sorry, there was a bug on my phone. It's not the person's intent to microaggress the person. So I would call it more of like a micro stressor, because it's not like the other person's intent to like destroy your day, you know. But I think that it's important that we realize that some people walk about in life being more stressed about certain things and being more sensitive to certain things than others. And we can't know from our experience what another person will find stressful or hurtful. Sure, we need to treat others the way that we want to be treated, first of all, but we also need to respect that other people may have a completely different experience and views on life, and we need to, you know, be respectful of that. And I think that we need to understand that we can't understand everything, you know. I took up an example of when I worked at Pride, and there was a person who looked like a man from far away, had a beard and long, like had man clothes on, from what I could see from far away. And I thought, oh, this person has a map. We need to go and to that person and ask for directions, because we had to go to a certain tent and we didn't know where it was. So I said, oh, maybe he knows where we can get a map. So we ran to this person, and this person said, oh, it's actually a her, it's a she. And I was like, oh God, you know. First I was angry at the person, because I was like, well, how could I know? That's kind of my first instinct. My other instinct was like, oh shoot, I've misgendered a person at Pride. Like, how terrible is that? You know? And also, this person had probably said their their pronouns at the beginning when we did our introductions. However, I forgot everybody's name and everybody's pronouns from, like, you know, because my memory is shit. So I was like, oh shoot. But then I just had the reflex of like, okay, it's not such a big deal to me. This is probably a huge deal to this person. I could just simply say, oh, I'm sorry, she. And that solved the problem, you know? Then we could continue working on, you know? And then I just kept saying she to refer to that person. I didn't need to have to go into like, oh, you know, what is this person wearing? This makes no sense. Why is this person a she? Or keep misgendering the person or whatever. Sometimes there are things that we can't understand, and that's okay, because, you know, that's not our, like, we don't need to understand in order to respect a person. And the same goes for if somebody is wearing a veil, like, you know, just treat them as a person and respect the rules that they've set around their own identity, about their own beliefs. And, you know, you don't always have to comment everything either. You know, sometimes people are there and they're like, oh, I'm just being curious. It's like, do you have to comment on everything? Like, what you think is like a nice comment might be quite triggering to another person, you know? Especially if what you're saying is like not relevant to the conversation at large, you know? My mom has lived in France for 25 years, and she still gets said, like, told, oh, where does your accent come from? She's American. So just, I think that people should just be gentle to each other, respectful of each other. Just, you know, I'm not saying that people should be walking around eggshells with each other all the time either. But if you make a mistake, just own up to it and apologize, and then move on, you know? Yes, you might hurt somebody's feelings, but you've tried your best, and I think that the other person will appreciate that, you know? Because I appreciate when somebody, you know, says something, you know, and then ends up like changing their mind, I appreciate that, and I think that we should strive to just be more accommodating of each other's differences, and that none of us, you can't know unless you've been told. You can't know it unless you know. And so the goal here isn't to be more, to not be able to say anything. The goal is more about like, let's be more open in our communication. Let's be more mindful of each other's space and boundaries and our individualities, our history, our experience of life. It might be very different, but we're all humans on this planet, and just treat each other kindly. So that's all I had to say for today. That one person who said a bunch of really icky stuff, did flare up my minority stress, and I felt microaggressed. But what's positive is that I think that we're going in the right direction in general. I think, unfortunately, awful things still happen, but we're still fighting the fight, we're still working towards, including minorities, and I think that we just need to keep working in that direction and not give up and not say that everything's fine now. We need to keep working at it and treat each other kindly, and that is for everyone, minority or not, whatever your profession. And so I do hope that this orthopedic guy does not pass this class, and gets a little bit of where he actually has to think and be a little bit more self-aware of what his speech and what he says actually has consequences on the lives of other people. Because I'm not repeating what he said on YouTube, let's just say. But I am very positively, I'm glad that so many people are striving towards being more inclusive, more open-minded, and don't just think that this is just a silly thing, right? So tell me what you guys think. Have you been through minority stress? Do you have inner stressors? The protection towards inner stressors, according to this theory, is community, which is what I'm trying to create with this channel, and also being proud of your difference. So I hope that I'm getting this through on my channel. I know that there are a lot of people who are part of a minority that watch my channel. Either they're autistic or, it's something else. They come from another country, or, they're women, or they're LGBTQ, or there are all sorts of people of minorities. There are people who aren't part of a minority and who watch my channel, and they're also very open-minded people. So I think that it's an inclusive space where people can actually speak. There are some people that I delete their comment on site because I know the kinds of comments that they've had on this channel before. So and sometimes it's not censorship, sometimes it actually is for the good of the well-being of the community. That's how I will phrase it. Anyway, so have a good day, everybody. Bye.